Any other comments on the action items that were stated for landscaping enhancements and community well-being? Now, you'll notice that not all the cells are filled out. As we get to the end of this process, we will go back specifically looking at deadlines, who's going to take the lead and what type of financial impact some of them might have had. Who's going to take the lead and what type of financial impact some of them might have had. All right, so there was a little screwy there.
Something's wrong here.
Well, hold on, folks. I've got the YouTube. I had to put the YouTube up. I just need to mute the YouTube.
Something's wrong here.
Oh, hold on, folks. I've got the YouTube. I had to put the YouTube up. I just need to mute the YouTube. Hold on. Hey, C's on. CC,
Yes.
how do I mute the YouTube microphone? Hey, C's on.
You have to have the YouTube open on your computer.
How do I mute the YouTube
Is anybody on it?
microphone?
It takes a few minutes for it to populate to the channel.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they've got 3 on it. 3.
Okay, it's live now. Yeah.
No, they've got 3 on it. 3.
And did we confirm that an email was sent?
There's a link on the website. I made sure it was on the posted calendar.
But you didn't send an email.
Link that it's the same link that's been used in all the other ones if one hasn't been sent.
Right, but if we don't tell them, they may not know that there's a meeting.
We told them in the FYI on Friday.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Also, my screen went from showing 12 images to 9. I'm missing,
Yeah, there's missing screens here.
yeah, I'm missing Brownie, I'm missing Terry and Mike. Showing 12 images to 9.
Yeah, there's missing screens.
I'm missing Brownie, I'm missing Terry and Mike.
Okay. I muted the site. Now, Jerry, let's see. I've got everybody got kicked off here. Hold on. All right, here they come back again. No, because I needed to mute the YouTube because that's the redundancy. It was, I had to go live on my computer for the YouTube, and I think that just throws things into a, I've got two
Looks like we're all back here.
streams going on at the same time on my,
Everybody off because I was off for about 2-3 minutes.
Well, what happened is we got an internet outage is what it was.
That's what I saw.
Oh, it was. I saw it on my computer. We got one of those short outages and it cut off, it dropped everybody.
We had a whole power outage. The whole electric went down too. So.
can anybody confirm if the YouTube is up and running?
It says it's live on YouTube now on my screen.
It
And,
says,
okay,
it
good.
says it is, yeah.
all
You're
right.
good.
And I'm just wondering whether or not, because I muted it from my side, I just want to make sure that it's not muted completely so they can't hear what we're talking about. Anybody? Can anybody check that? Otherwise,
wouldn't
we're gonna
like
just do
that.
this.
What? I just lost it again.
I need you guys to talk a little bit so I can test.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still going.
Reviewing landscaping improvements and community well-being, Lanny accurately brought out that one of the items should be listed as white fencing. Was there any other comments on the action items? Now, again, we will come back to these at a later point in time and look at establishing some deadlines, who will be the accountable parties, and what might be some of the estimated financial impact. You know, it's harder to predict what financial impact it might be. So sometimes as a shortcut, at least initially, you just use like a restaurant with dollar signs, $1, $2, or $3 signs to indicate the level of financial impact without knowing for certain a dollar amount. All right, so we want to focus our time today on looking at the Cabana experience and renter reforms. And as time allows, we'll go to looking at amenities as well. Cezanne, is the sound good for YouTube?
Yes, you're all set.
All right, very good. Okay, so enhancements to the Cabana experience. You've seen some of the discussion points in terms of the survey respondents supporting and not supporting a new Cabana, the interest, regardless of a new Cabana or not, on extended hours and days for the Cabana operations, and other interests in terms of the Cabana experience. So in your mind, what are some of the things that we need to address? Starting with you, John, go ahead. Jack, sorry.
Oh, it says John on the screen. So in the executive committee meeting yesterday, we had a definition discussion on what the Cabana is and what the Tiki Bar is and what the difference is. So we basically decided that the Cabana should be referred to as the existing structure, and something that resembles a Tiki Bar or some other kind of thing like that would be a new addition. So I think that's where we'd like to try to differentiate between the miscommunication perhaps on the Cabana experience.
All right, good. Thanks, Jack. So going forward, we'll use the word Cabana to represent the current and Tiki to represent the new, so that we're all on the same page. Lanny.
Just, Jack, a question. Why did you decide on Tiki rather than outdoor bar and grill the way we decided last week?
Well, all right, outdoor bar and grill. Maybe I just misspoke.
Yeah, I think we decided outdoor bar and grill yesterday. Or
Okay,
recommended.
Yeah.
it's a
So if
senior
you-
moment.
So, Jerry, if you would change that on our document, so like at the top, 56% supported a new outdoor bar and grill, which is the way actually it was worded in the survey.
Very good. And I will,
And, you know, and there's other places too.
right. Okay, so we're clear on the distinction between the two, Cabana and outdoor bar and grill. So recognizing that this is an area of interest among a good percentage of the community, and that there are certain changes they would like to see to the current Cabana experience, whether that means updating and expanding some of the features of the Cabana or a new outdoor bar and grill. Where do you think we should begin?
Finding the what we expect to be the current, will be the current condition of the Cabana following the renovations that are underway right now. So that means that the bar has been rehabilitated. The bathrooms have been restored to renovated to new conditions. A new shade structure will be in place in about a month. And there's a new access to the shaded structure area from the bar.
Jack, can you explain the last one?
We are the then current Cabana bar had only one way for the bar people and the waiters to get in and out, and that was near the men's room door. We're cutting a hole in the top of the bar toward the ladies' room side, and to have access from that side as well.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So 3 major changes to the Cabana Bar will be the renovated bathrooms, a new shade structure, and a new access to the shade area from the bar.
That's right.
Chat.
In terms of action required, it would seem to me that since we're now going to have better access to what will be the new shade shelter, we ought to start thinking about, or, well, at least thinking about what additional services we might provide to make better use of the new covered shades, the new covered outdoor shade structure. You know, we're going to have that. And, you know, what does that mean in terms of what changes we could make to service or offerings to take into account that we now have this new covered shade structure that's very close to the cabana?
So what are some of your thoughts in terms of dealing with that, Terry?
Yeah, if we're talking about a new shade structure, it sounds to me like we need to discuss capacity of what's going underneath that shade structure. In other words, basically, I would assume that it would be an eating area, and therefore, what would be the eating capacity with that new
Right, so
place?
without consideration of social distancing for a moment, the design of the stage structure, how many tables or how many, seats were possible with the shade structure? Chat?
Oh, no, I'm just.
Oh, okay. So Mark, do you have that information? The shade structure is going to have the capability of seating how many people?
I don't really have an accurate count because I'm not sure what the configuration of the actual support posts and its construction will allow. Currently, there's seating down there for about 48 people under, in that back area there.
Let's also consider the traditional seating out in front of the cabana also, so that whole area could be useful for the same purposes. So the whole idea was outdoor seating, some shaded, some not.
I think 50 is a good number to use right now.
Okay.
That's without social
Would it
distancing.
be all seating or just under the shade?
Under the shade.
Okay, good.
And that includes the actual canopy plus umbrellas that would be used in areas that don't have a canopy, I would assume.
Well, I don't think we counted all the umbrellas.
No.
We're just looking at
The 50.
if you included all the canopy seating areas that are currently in use, it's probably close to the 65 or 70, but
Agreed.
you can't count that kind of number right now.
Well, why?
We can, but not accurately, I mean.
Well, we're confused
We
here.
could get it before the next meeting.
I'm going to go to Lanny and then back to you, Chat.
Yeah, I think our action item is to have Mark develop a good figure of what he proposes for the number of seats for outdoor seating in the 2 areas once the shade structure is up and he has that sense. And we'll need both a initial figure or a maximum figure and then a social distance figure.
That's why I said I couldn't give you an accurate number right now.
Right.
Mark, when we had the happy hours out there last year, and we had a couple Tapas Tuesdays, you recall the numbers we had?
Oh, we were easily sitting 75 to 80 people all the way around. 'Cause they
Right,
were underneath
that's my recollection. So
They
I
were
would go with
underneath
that number.
the cantilever shade structures along the side held probably 24 people. And then you had people out in front, which is another 30 or 40, and then another, 40 or 50 in the back. So yeah, there was quite a few people.
So when we talk about cabana enhancement, I think we're talking about everything around that cabana, including the umbrellas, the existing shade shelters, and the new one that's going in. So why don't we go with 80?
Okay. Lanny,
Just a question, Mark, if you're counting the entire cantilever section, are you thinking that the lounges would be moved for the evening and there wouldn't be any lounge seating under there?
I think what we had was when we moved everything around, we had lounges on the eastern side of the cantilevers and tables on the western side. Right now, we've moved everything around and there's like 4 or 5 tables and then there's just 2 lounges there. Yeah, we can accommodate that to be all seating at night under the cantilevers because it's got lights in the cabana and underneath there. And then that allows us to have more seating there. And then when the shade shelter goes up, we'll probably have lights and fans in that as well.
And so you'd be able to move the tables during the day someplace so that the lounges could go back in?
I just have to kind of logistically take a look at how that all works.
Okay,
Necessity is the mother of invention there. Depends on whether we need them and when we need them. We may not need them until February, March,
right.
so we're establishing what the capacity is. And of course, we recognize that that will change with the need for greater social distancing. But with regard to some of these changes to the cabana, how do we want to capitalize on those? And this gets to some operational issues, but they also come with corresponding increase in costs as well. But we're hearing, based on the survey, both the written comments and is that people want to have greater access.
June 3rd.
So what are some of
Okay.
your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's the
Okay, we have,
probably the $64,000 question is,
okay,
increased hours of operation with
Excuse me?
labor doesn't always translate into, a profitable bottom line because if it's windy, cold, rainy, or
Mhm.
something else is going on and there's a conflict, we still have to have the staff there available and ready to go.
Okay.
And we're only dealing with a captive audience of X. So
all right, thank you.
that's why in a nutshell, country club type food and beverage operations are a subsidized entity. There is no 250,000 drive-by cars that could, with advertising, to come in and use your restaurant. That's just not the way it happens. We're there. We supply the labor and the availability, and then hope that some of our captive audience that enjoys what we have comes in to utilize it. So balancing the budget for the entire homeowners association against the needs of a group of people that want to see enhanced hours. And according to the survey, it says that half of the people responding to the surveys would support either a new cabana or at least seem to want to have increased services of that type, whether it's at a new one or the existing. So, I think that the finance committee, board, et cetera, is going to have a bit of a sort of a conundrum on their hands when we go into the budget sessions, because we'll put together a pro forma saying, if you're open 3 nights a week at the Cabana, it'll be X. If you're open 4 nights, 5 nights, if you want to be open 6 nights a week at the Cabana during season, then the costs are going to be X associated with having the staff available, not only for all day long, but all night long too. So you really have a, that amount of labor is exponential against what may or may not be income to adequately support it. I think that we just have to
I think we're
really.
getting ahead of ourselves, Mark. I don't know that we need to have numbers to that extent that we can define.
Not for this exercise. I think it's just a matter of whether or not strategically, that's probably one of the strategic initiative or action required, is understanding what the incremental cost strategies will be as we try to accommodate what people want. Days and hours of it being open, expand the happy hours, having more social events, which may mean having, music or bands or whatever down at the pool. Summer Cabana hours, having TVs, which is no problem. How do we manage that? And I think we just have to really get an understanding of what the costs associated with.
So essentially, the more we do, the more we lose.
Yep, because it's a labor surrounds when you're selling drinks for $3 and $4 a piece and beers for $3 or $4 a piece, and you're selling food down there, if it's Cabana food at $6, $7, $8, the amount of money that it's going to take to generate a break even is pretty hefty.
So we need to look at that, but, not.
Right, so as an action item, as you pointed out, Mark, getting a greater understanding of what will be the costs associated with the addition of various enhancements in terms of days and hours, or adding events and bands or things of that nature. Terry?
Yeah, that brings up, and I'm not sure it fits into this category or not, Mark, but as you stipulate the problem of the more service that you provide, the less money you make, which is a dynamic that I think we all agree is there. I think it raises the issue of how to fund this. We have to take a look at the fact that we are funding this already by the budget every year, having to pick up whatever the shortfall is. Problem is that people don't see it and don't realize that cost is picked up by them already. We were to take a look at it in a logical way and say, okay, just for the sake of argument, we lose $200,000 a year. 735 homeowners, how much is that per person or per family? Let's say we make a minimum of, let's say, $300 or $500 per family to be utilized during the course of the year. That would fund the $200,000 that we lost. It would also not only be a detriment of $500 to the homeowner, but it would allow them to have access to the Cabana and whatever other services, the clubhouse, et cetera, that they may have not used before. The problem is that they're already paying for it, but they don't see it. If they were to participate in that type of dynamic, they could wipe out the debt and become a partner into the community in a much larger fashion. That it's always been a problem when we talk about it, but when you link the two, when you link how much you're going to do as far as a minimum is concerned, to be able to take away what the loss is, it kind of balances out and becomes a positive instead of a negative.
Lanny?
We did ask homeowners how they felt about a minimum, and they were definitely opposed to it. The other aspect of having a minimum is it's not clear whether our current kitchen can serve all the people that would be spending that money. You know, even the 80 that we're talking about as a cabana enhancement, last year, the food ran out most nights, and that, you know, caused mixed issues. I don't know, maybe there was food for 40, but seating for 80, but, and that was just a single tapas type item. It wasn't the kind of menu that people are asking for. So I think that we need to see a broader plan developed of what can be done given our kitchen limitations. And yeah, period.
One of the things quickly just about a minimum and I can tell you that it's a huge debate in the club world. The problem with a minimum, if you're going to tie it to a budget structure and you're going to have it on a fiscal basis, and let's just say I'll make it $200. There is no possible way for the existing physical plant to manage more than 10%, 15% of the population of the community at any given time who wants to come in and utilize their minimum. If they all want to decide to wait until February, or I mean till November or December, you would not be able to withstand the onslaught of you'd have to open 7 days, 7 nights a week, be able to manage the onslaught of people who wanted to spend their minimum before the end of the year.
So
And then
we
it would be
need
upset when you
parameters
couldn't
for
get-
this.
So
It's like,
you have to.
I agree with you.
You have to
so
really
let's-
understand how to manage that situation, and most of the successful clubs that do have a minimum, they make it a monthly minimum, and it's usually payable and due halfway through the fiscal year. Down here, they do it in July and August so that you don't have to worry about the onslaught when it occurs.
I know that.
I'll go to Jack,
I know that.
add, and then I'll go to chat.
Well, I think, I don't know what we're trying, we can't build a budget around a cabana experience. We're trying to do a strategic plan. So I need Jerry's guidance for how to get through this, obvious stumbling block if we don't have all the data we need.
Well, that is the item that becomes part of the strategic plan. Is there needs to be a data gathering process to be able to make informed decisions. Chat.
I think I'm totally with Jack. I don't want to get sidetracked here with talking about minimums. I think
Right.
where we have to start is what are the possible options for increasing our hours and menu offerings, etc., of the current cabana and the current cabana shade structure? What are those options? Then we can figure out what it's going to cost. Then we can talk about how we're going to pay for that cost. That's when you start talking about minimums, not now. I mean, it just seems to me the action step is there are 3 or 4 alternatives to what we want to do or try to do to enhance the cabana experience. Here they are. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here are the costs. 1, 2, 3, 4. How are we going to pay for it? We'll deal with that when we know the facts.
Right. Okay, so we know that there are changes that are being made to the cabana. And with that, we know that the overall seating capacity has an N of about 80. We know that the shaded seating will be around 50. That's not taking into consideration the reduction for social distancing. And we know that based on survey feedback, there is an interest in more days of the week and longer hours and having some type of events and activities associated with the cabana. All of those have a cost. So the action items are, what type of extra additional activities or days and hours are to be considered, and what is the corresponding cost with that?
Exactly. And those options should be,
Then we have to determine what are the ways in which to pay for that.
those options can be, there's more than one option. There's option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know how many there are.
Yes, but here's the conundrum. People want additional hours and additional seating. So let's open 7 nights a week. And
Well,
let's
that's awesome.
extend it till 7 or 9 o'clock every night. Then everyone has access for an extended period of time. So without the discussion about cost, we're not going anywhere.
That's option 5, Paul.
Say that again?
That might be option 5. There's a long way between doing nothing to
Well,
change.
that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going with this. We have any number of options here. So I could say, let's open every day and extend the hours till 9 o'clock. But without a discussion of what impact that's going to have economically for us, we're going nowhere. I think we need to zero in on something that's reasonable for Sterling Oaks. I mean, Mark gave us the introduction there. I think we need to understand that concept clearly and then set up our guidelines. But without the discussion of financial impact here, we could be wasting a lot of time.
Good. Go ahead, Jack.
Well, it's an iterative approach, okay? You look at one piece and put a cost on it. You look at a second piece and put a cost on it. You can actually try them out next year when everything's there and look at piece 1 and see how it's working, and then decide if it makes sense to go to phase 2 or phase 3 or whatever you want to call it. So, I mean, it's something we can do in sequence if we have the data, which will be the feedback from the first year's operation.
Well, I mean, part of the process will be as well as, there will be a whole business model put together with the type of menu, the type of service, the pricing structures, the costs, the number of individuals it'll take to put that together at any given time, so that we'll have an understanding of what the cost would be to open up on any given night. And if we have sales of X, then we have a variable Y. And we can apply that to subsequent days. When it gets into season and we have events and multiple overlapping events, I'll just say, let's say it's St. Patrick's Day, or it's, any other day of the week where we've got something going on. And if the community wants to see St. Patrick's Day, but they want to be down at the Tiki Bar or Cabana Bar, watching TV and having, chicken wings instead of corned beef, the exponential cost of having 2 sets of, labor groups on at the same time, those start to impact the budget as well. So we can put all that together and give the board a myriad of scenarios to look at. And then you can move from one to another if you'd like to say, well, let's start with this, and if it works well, we'll go to the next. But I think you'll all get that information ahead of time from a budgetary standpoint.
I'm going to go to Jack and then to you, Chap.
Okay, we need baby steps, okay? We don't need to know everything. We need to know pieces at a time and decide if it's working. So I think Brownie can put a computer program together that can put all these components into an array and look at all the permeabilities of this operation. So, I mean, this is this is harder than counting the coronavirus victims.
Chat.
I like Jack's approach, and that would basically be as a first phase, if you will, I guess unfortunately have Mark, and you lost me, I'm sorry. I'll get back up, put together can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, have Mark put together what I'll call a modest enhancement plan we could try out. And then if that seems to be popular, then we go on to the next phase, whatever that is. So in other words, I think we ought to start by walking before we run, which is basically what Jack is saying.
Right.
Okay, I'm good with that. Do you all agree with me that based on this survey, the community has pretty much given us a carte blanche to expand the whole cabana experience, all the way from the bar and grill to the current cabana enhancement? And it's a little bit like the analogy of walking into a car dealership, and you have the basic model or you have the luxury model. And you ask, would you like all these accessories? And you say, yeah, sure, that's great, until we find out what those accessories cost. But I think that's where we are right now. The community is saying, expand the cabana enhancement somehow. Would you all agree that this survey reflects that?
Yes.
Yes.
No, I
Who
do
said
not.
no?
I did.
Go ahead, Terry.
I think it's very clear when you look at the number one item on this graph that you have in front of us, 56% supported a new cabana. And then we show that 64% would accept a monthly dues increase to support the operational portion of this. And if we go through all of these things and we're heading and we're working about all the items underneath that, and we're ignoring the top two items, we're not doing our job. We were asked to follow what the focus group is saying. The focus group is saying 56%, which is the highest rate of anything on the whole focus group, that we want a new cabana bar. And
So let's stay on that topic for
we
a
want a
moment.
tiki.
There's a couple of things going on. We'll continue with that distinction between the cabana and the outdoor bar and grill. The outdoor bar and grill representing something that's an entirely new entity. There's an investment going on currently to the cabana in terms of the restroom, a refreshing of the cabana, the shade structure. So we have these new enhancements to the cabana, and we're talking about how to capitalize on those based upon gathering some data and doing a slow trial and assessing as we go for next season in terms of something like expanded days and hours.
Exactly.
Excuse me?
Exactly.
Right. Now, a secondary issue is the one that Terry is bringing forward again, and that is, at the same time, we have to explore the value and need as defined by the residents of the community, both currently and ongoing, for an entirely new structure, an outdoor bar and grill. So they're not one or the other type of issue. I think these are two issues that have to be explored somewhat concurrently. Paul.
Yes, I agree entirely with that. And you articulated it better than I did because I got my new terms mixed up. So Terry, I meant to include the bar and grill. I happen to call it the cabana experience because that's what the survey said. But yes, I agree with you, and I agree with what Jerry just articulated.
So, and in fact, if some of the things that are tried on a trial basis going into next season in terms of enhancements of the Cabana experience are successful, in many ways, if the demand continues to increase, that only adds more momentum for looking at an outdoor bar and grill. But in the meantime, there are some preliminary steps in exploring a bar and grill that can be done concurrently. So what are your thoughts on how to proceed with that exploration? Go ahead, Chap.
Well, we'd have to start with exactly where we started when we embarked on the current renovation. That process would be the same here. You know, it's simply a matter of when do you want to spend the money to get that process started.
And that process is not going to be inexpensive in its onset.
I kind of disagree. I think you can start the second phase process of the outdoor bar and grill in incremental pieces, okay? And put some data together and get some judgments about cost, and then revisit that, you know, as need be. We stopped Terry's Tiki Bar project because we wanted to wait, and it's time to bring it back on the table. There's a couple of things that are significant in terms of decisions that would have to be made, but I mean, it's part of a process in strategic planning that we can go through the pieces and make judgments as we go along and decide if this is a deal enhancer or a deal breaker as we move through the steps. So that's kind of what we can do.
Right, and to build on that, some of the preliminary steps would include gathering data on what are some of the external trends, both in Southwest Florida and nationwide, going out and benchmarking other communities within Southwest Florida in terms of what they have to offer, how do they, you know, pay for it, and other types of data that could be gathered. These things don't have costs attached to them, but are the information gathering that is essential as we move, you know, down the road. Lanny?
Even though I'm very cognizant of the strong support from homeowners for an outdoor bar and grill, I'm also quite aware that this survey was conducted before we knew the impact of COVID-19. We don't know the impact of COVID-19 on next year's season. And I think that we need to keep the outdoor bar and grill as a possibility in a 3 to 5 year plan. But I think that we probably need to step back a year from the way many of us were thinking at one point, because we may be under severe restrictions next season and have no idea of what the real impact of our current cabana enhancements are, because we're closed most of the time. So I think that it needs to be there, but I'm not thinking the way I was 6 months ago about developing, you know, getting architectural plans and that kind of thing, because I think we need to get through this year and see what next year looks like.
I think that's a good point. We are certainly in a period of time of greater uncertainty than we were just this time last year. And so there's a lot of unknowns as we proceed forward over the next season. That being said, there are still preliminary steps that we can take before we move to hiring an architect. All right, Paul, I know I had a few hands up. I'll go to Paul and then back to you, Chap.
Right, that's the point I was going to make too. We can lay out preliminary plans based on what happens in society down the road. We can adjust those plans. And obviously, the Tiki Bar will not go up, and if it were approved, would not happen next year anyway. And the year after is still a question in terms of how we would proceed in the planning. I think we already have some architectural plans that have been done over a year ago. They're done, paid for. Terry has his own projections from a contractor, so we have some preliminary information already. Now, I think we can lay out some preliminary plans. I don't think we're ready to break ground next year for sure, maybe not even the year after based on the economy and what's going on. So I think that's way down the road, but it would not prevent us from doing some preliminary plans to give an idea to the community. And I wouldn't go forward with any of this before we survey the community to say, here's what we're thinking, and this is the dollar amount that we're proposing.
Good. Chap.
Well, first of all, I just have to comment, I'm flabbergasted with Lanny's position on this, and that was meant to be humorous, not critical. I'm not sure we have any preliminary plans that are worth the powder to blow them up.
So you're right, we don't. So what we could still go through the process of putting the steps together to make a decision.
Other thoughts on how we proceed with regard to an outdoor bar and grill? Brownie, we haven't heard from you. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think everybody, for once, I actually agree with Lanny, okay? I think with the virus going, I think with the virus going on, the new outdoor improvements we're making the Cabana, we just need to sit back, see how that works out. Are we going to lose money, make money on it? Are people going to use it? We've got the spacing requirements to worry about. We don't really quite know. There's a lot of uncertainty. And you know, we all have preliminary plans already about an outdoor bar, about what we think about it. And there's lots of studies and plans, and already I would not be for this point spending any money to do any other studies. And I would say that really from a practical standpoint, let's wait a year. We've got to see how the next season, how the Cabana works out, see how the virus works out. Are we going to get a vaccine? Is it going to go away or not go away? Let's just, you know, I think we've got a responsibility to, and you know, there's going to be thousands of restaurants that are closing because of the virus. And here we're thinking about maybe adding another place for people to eat in groups. You know, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't think that position surprises anybody, but all I'm saying, I agree with Lanny with the virus thing. I think it's all the more reason to at least set back for a year before we take off any plan on a tiki bar.
This is a 3 to 5 year plan. You can't stop making the plan because it's 3 to 5.
Paul?
Yeah, I guess that's my point too. I think we owe it to the community that based on this survey, that this is a high priority and high interest to the community. I'm not suggesting we go out and break ground in 1 or 2 or even 3 years. I'm saying I think we have enough information to begin a plan down the road and see where that takes us. Let me remind all of you that David Poorman, local architect, has drawn plans already. We put them on hold because we felt it was premature and did not want to move forward until we had information from the strategic plan. And now that we do have information from the plan, we do have some preliminary information that can help guide us. So I'm suggesting we respond to the strategic plan, the survey, and to the community and begin a planning process. Doesn't mean to say it's actionable. It just says that in terms of 3 to 5 years down the road, we can start thinking about this.
Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, apparently we paid $3,500 for some action that which our architectural work that is supposedly being held up perhaps we should let it loose and come up with what it is and see what it tells us. I've always felt that it's better to have more information than less. We already paid for it.
Well,
Are you mean sharing
Agree.
it in the board or sharing it with the whole community?
I have no problem with sharing it with the whole community. That's being transparent is what we're talking about. And we've been talking about it for a long time, but we haven't been very transparent.
Yeah, it's just that without sufficient communication, that could create a
Yeah,
some type of adverse reaction.
Right.
The stage that we're in currently.
Well,
Now,
not
some of the
sharing
things
it,
that we can be done
not
over the
sharing
next
it,
12
not
months.
sharing it also has a negative reaction.
well, the board has to interpret it. The board has to interpret those plans at this time. It was done probably 9 months ago. And given the current situation, the board has to interpret what that means. So before we share it with the community, we need to deal with it internally.
Well, suppose we see it. I mean, then we can discuss them.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
I
fine.
haven't seen them.
That's fine.
I think we
So
need
in terms of some of the actions that can take place, and I'll get to you in a second, Lanny, you know, we can do some gathering of external data on terms of trends for casual dining, looking longer term over the next 10 years. We can benchmark other communities to get a greater idea of how they're dealing with the increased interest in casual dining. We can look at the David Foreman architectural drawings for interpretation and reassessment. And then as we go through next season, we can assess usage as we try greater days of the week or greater hours or additional events. And then as a function of time, we're reassessing based on where we are as a society dealing with COVID-19. Lanny.
I just wanted to point out that our regulations stipulate that once the board has a document, homeowners may ask to see it. We don't have to distribute it to them, but we cannot keep something secret if someone asks. And that's one of the reasons why we did not accept the documents from David Foreman last year, is that we decided we weren't ready to interpret them. But I just wanted to remind everyone that if one of these action items is that we're allowed to see those documents, homeowners may ask to see it, although it's unlikely that anyone will.
Good point. Chap?
I agree with everybody. The only thing I'm not sure of is what specific action steps should we be taking now to keep this outdoor bar and grill alive? That's all I don't understand.
And I think information gathering is what, and assessing the impact in terms of usage by the community of the changes put in place next year will help that. But it's all data gathering over the foreseeable future, especially in light of the uncertainty with COVID-19. Terry?
Yeah, it just seems to me that, we're talking about a plan and we're taking a look at what COVID-19 is going to do to affect that, which is destabilizing because we're looking at a plan that's going to be over 3 to 5 years. I'm looking at a plan that was set up that I wasn't able to view. I independently put together a commercial construction company to give us an idea of what a tiki bar would cost, far less than what was put into the plan originally. And all of a sudden that got sidetracked to the point where it's not even visible. And as Lanny pointed out, if we accept some information, we should be able to share it with whomever asks. Still don't understand why transparency is a problem. I really and truly do. I mean, if we can interpret something, then the homeowners should also have the ability to do so on their own. I mean, what makes us better than them? It
But
doesn't,
one of the things to keep in mind is that when
doesn't square with
talking
me.
about a capital enhancement project, it's really important to consider how to best manage the process, because ultimately your goal is, if you're going to propose it to the community, is to have a successful vote. So how you communicate to the community throughout the process becomes critical to help determine whether your end result will be successful or not. So just presenting information early without any other additional information will open the door for people to have their own reaction without having a full understanding of all the steps in the process, where they, stick their feet in the ground and say no. And so it might not be in the best interest to be sharing that information preliminarily. Go back.
Oh, well said.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to what I saw. This is a situation that's been going on for about 5 years. The original Plan A and subsequent plans were all kept from the community until the last minute, and then were put out there. And what this board said, well, we're going to be transparent, and we're going to let people do as we go through the steps. And here we go back to the same scenario that got us in trouble the first time and the second time, 2 votes that went down the tubes. And now all of a sudden we're using the same process. I think the process is wrong. It's just plain wrong. Give the information to everybody, let them interpret what they want, and watch us go through the process as we go through each integer. There's nothing wrong with sharing information. People are adults. They're entitled to the information, and they should have the ability to look at it should they choose to.
Well, that's a good point. My only add-on is that we should be able to couch that in terms of defining the process, so people know what this means and how it's going to be used, and that it is just preliminary and there's multiple steps before we get to an end result. Go ahead, Jack.
We're not saying we're withholding information. This document that we asked David Poorman to prepare isn't finished. There's nothing to look at. We can have a meeting with David Poorman and we can talk about the information he needs to finish what he needs to do. It's fine. It's part of the process. It's easy. Okay. So for us to say we're not sharing, or we don't have any information to share, there's major decisions that need to be made to allow his work to go forward to finish what Terry needs done. That's all.
So you're saying there's not finished architectural drawings at this point?
Correct.
No.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Brownie.
Okay. Jerry, I know you don't have all the background, but first of all, there were 2 votes where basically $4 million projects were voted down, mainly because of the money. Okay. Paul came in. I think we were very transparent. Paul did a great job. We put all the information out, and we're able to pass to get the renovation to the clubhouse at a price that people would accept, and a lot of transparency. So that was done. This question of an outdoor bar and grill lingers on, but I think with the virus and thing going on, again, I would say again, I don't know what we would do right now to make plans. There are a million plans on that bar. We spent money. I don't know what we would do right now. Another thing I would mention is we're talking about people's input. I'm just curious what kind of survey results we've got now. If we redid it after the virus, people might feel a little bit different about casual and spending money for more places to eat and more places to associate. Now that might change in a year. We don't know what's going to happen. Again, I come back. I think we need to kind of put things on hold about another grill and outdoor bar, see what happens with a new thing, and then next year, see where we are and then think about it.
Brownie, I agree with you. Just want you to keep in mind that we're not talking about a plan for just next year. We're talking about a 3 to 5 year plan. So to the extent that people can imagine, given the uncertainty of current events, that there could be a new outdoor grill within the next 5 years, we still have steps that we need to take as we move forward.
I can't, Jerry, I can't picture those steps. We've had million steps.
But that's
the
your
step-
right to not
I-
picture.
I would
Okay?
agree that we could have it in the plan, that we should look at it in 3 or 5 years. I can't picture what we need to do today, okay?
Well,
That's
then
where I am.
maybe you
I
need
just-
to get, maybe we can find out if we can do step one.
Right. I think there's information gathering and assessing the impact of changes done next year that are all part of the near-term beginning steps in this process.
I don't think information gathering in the midst of this virus will be very valid. We need to wait and see what's going to happen with the virus and what's going to happen with the improvements we've made to the existing Cabana Bar. So I don't know what information we can get now that is
Because
useful.
the virus, you can't stop everything. We're all gonna die at some point in time too, but I'm not stopping.
Yeah, and I'll probably be the first in this group too. Okay.
So Terry, give your 73-year-old speech at this point.
Yeah, I guess you're
Chat, we've
right.
been waiting.
Paul. I started this when I was, I guess, 70, and I said to myself, I hope I live long enough to have this tiki bar so that I could at least hold it up and take a drink. You know, there comes a certain time when I won't even be able to lift a glass.
I
Go
wanna-
ahead, Chat.
By the way, Terry, you keep using Tiki Bar. I think it would be good to drop that and to use the outdoor grill and casual dining, okay? You keep
I-
using the Tiki Bar.
I can shorten it by saying tiki bar. It's
just-
less words.
Out, so I put you
Go
back.
ahead, Chat.
Okay. thanks.
I want to, Jerry, I
Jack?
think you've heard an awful lot here. My position is I want to keep the possibility of a new outdoor bar and grill alive. Jerry, I'm going to put you on the spot. What action steps are required to keep this alive in the context of a strategic plan? That's all I want to know. And I think that's where we all are.
Right. It's
Thank you, Jack.
gathering external trends, benchmarking peer communities, assessing usage over the next season, given that all of that has to be balanced, knowing that we're under an environment of COVID-19, identifying the current problems and the potential benefits of a new structure. And then at that point, you begin gathering the architectural drawings. Any type of architectural drawing shouldn't just be one. It should be, here's good, better, and best. So there are options. And then we develop a communication plan to the community and begin the process of gathering feedback as to what the community will accept before going to a vote. Now, this could be about a 3-year process. Mark?
Jerry, you've done this exercise with 6 or 7 communities in the area.
Yes.
How many of those communities have done?
My
this?
role ends with developing the plan. Others, I'm there right through the communication process leading to the vote.
So of those 6 or 7 communities that you're dealing with or have dealt with in the past, how many are specifically have you had to deal with the outside casual dining experience enhancement?
2.
And was there quite a bit of discussion about the pros and cons as far as what the impact on financial status and use of the community probably was?
Yes, certainly.
So we could probably go and look at some of those communities or ask them, which I happen to have those individuals here in my.
Yeah,
Well, I know they
I think especially you, Mark, talking general manager to general manager, we'll be able to gather a lot of good, useful information. And I can set up some of those meets. All right, so we're going around in circles a little bit. Some of it is beneficial, others is just reiterative. We know that we're going to be making changes to the Cabana experience next season. We know that there's enhancements to the Cabana taking place right now with the additional shade structure in the bathrooms. And we know we want to continue to move down the road with looking at a new outdoor bar and grill. Can we turn now to renter reform? Does anybody have a problem moving on now to renter reform?
Okay.
Everybody good? All right, so let's turn to renter reform then. If you look at some of the discussion points on strategic issue 4.0 for renter reforms, we know there's issues in terms of adherence to community standards and rules and regulations of renters. We know that there's issues with residents renting using Airbnb or VRBO. We know that there's issues with how renters comport themselves and using the amenities and things of that nature. So where do we begin with renter reform? What do we need to do? Go ahead, Terry, and then I'll go to you, Paul.
Yeah, I have a problem of this being such a large piece, and I'll tell you why. We've heard from a lot of people in the community that have complained about how the renters are taking advantage of our community and not following the rules. Last year, we had 2 incidents which came up to the board and were handled very professionally. We threw some people into large suspensions, fined them, etc. And what that has done has cleaned up problem to a great extent. And the people who would take advantage of this situation viewed what happened to the 2 people involved and may have thought, now the whole community does not have that information, so therefore it still shows up to reform being very important. And I don't want to discount that, but I want to take some time, the board credit and the management credit for what was done last season. And maybe Mark can add if the impact of that has been positive to the situation. And then from that point on to decide if there's anything more we need to do other than what has been done to set the community, how shall I say, attitude. Mark, maybe you can comment on that to a certain extent.
Well, I think that the perception is reality when it comes to these any group of people, or especially these homeowners associations. They have a hive mentality, and once they get something in their head, it's probably becomes a little more real than it may actually be. I think the renter reform centers around 2 areas, in my opinion. One is that it's communication to the community at large, especially to those individuals who have an investment property, that they understand truly what the parameters of the lease is all about. So that if you are going to rent your property, or are renting your property, or intend to rent your property in any reform, whether it's annually, seasonally, multiple times a year, that you have a very, very clear understanding of what the rules and regulations and the nuances are surrounding that endeavor. The second is from the community standpoint that is not involved, that worries about the renters. They have to be there has to be a communication to them that the lease process and the checks and balances that are currently under, undergoing review or under our specific purviews are being managed properly so that they all understand that renters are supposed to be X, Y, and Z. We've had a couple of bad renters, and one of those, of course, was the person who came in front of the board last year. She for whatever reason, felt that she didn't need to abide by the specific rules of the road and found ways to circumvent it. I think that bad apple in the barrel really did a damage to the overall community. She, as Terry said, she was brought before the board. There was a disciplinary action, and the subsequent action of those, fees and suspensions, et cetera, probably rippled through the community to a certain degree. But I think that we have to do two things. One is communicate effectively to the parties on both sides. And the second is we have to have very clear and ironclad rules and regulations as it applies to the lessees and the and to the landlords, that we can really put our backbone in and make sure that the board can act swiftly and decisively when needed.
Good. All right, thank you, Mark. I'm going to go to Chap and then Lindia and then you, Paul.
I agree totally with Terry. I don't think that, given the current situation with renters here at Sterling Oaks, this is a strategic issue. I think the whole subject can be dealt with two things. Maybe it's one letter. I don't know what it is. But those two things are, let's make sure that everyone in the community knows what the rules are as it relates to renting their property. And the second thing is, here is what the board has done and will continue to do to make sure that renter issues don't become a problem. That's it.
Yeah, easy to
Right,
say.
so two communications. Lindia.
Yeah, I see two problems. I think with the homes, we've got some owners that are renting to more than one family at a time.
Right.
So you're having 2 or 3 couples renting a house with 2 and 3 big trucks and vehicles. The neighbors
Right.
don't like it. They're using all the amenities. So what normally should be 2 people at the pool has turned into 6. And then in the condos, I think they're renting, a couple rents and then another couple rolls in for 3 weeks of the 4, which puts a strain on our water, sewer, and trash bills. So I think financially and amenity wise, we do have to look at those things.
Good, thank you. Paul.
Yeah, it occurred to me listening to Terry and chat that we need to articulate this issue much along the lines that Lindia just did. And I think we have a number of issues, and we have a number of issues in particular neighborhoods that maybe the board is not aware of. It would come to Mark's attention and to my attention more so than most board members, unless you have an issue in your neighborhood, John B. Hoke. So I think one of the things we need to do is talk about a bad renter and define what a bad renter is and what it can do and might do and has done in a neighborhood. And Lindia mentioned a couple things, but we need to talk in terms of noise in a community, number of vehicles, number of people that rent a particular unit, and the very nature of the number of peoples and how they interact with their neighbors is an issue. And it's gone beyond what is healthy, I think. So unless you hear about these things, you don't know that it exists in our community, but there are many of them. I think the short-term rental issue has not gone away, and it's a critical concern to any neighborhood. And we were able to manage the one that we had this year, but that doesn't mean to say that we will not have other issues. We have issues with people renting their property and circumventing our documents by saying that this renter is a relative, and therefore they have access to all the amenities in the community. And in discussing this with Jason last year, this is his expertise. This is what he does for a living. And I think we need some amendments to our docs, our declarations in particular. And he can help us with that. And I think we do have issues that we have to address. Another thing is our transfer fees and what we charge. This is a considerable revenue to the association. And from what I can gather through the Beekman report and in Mark's contact with other communities, is that we're rather low in this area. And it may be time to be looking at increasing our transfer fees along the way here too. So I think as we discuss renter issues, I think the board has to come up to speed with what these problems are. And I do think it's a strategic initiative here and something we need to look at.
Thank you, Mark. All right, so I'm trying to summarize a couple of things that concern, Brownie, you have a comment on that?
Well, let me say, I know of 3 or 4 long-term rentals. In other words, there's 2 issues. Long-term rentals and the short-term rentals are kind of separate issues in
Right.
what the issue is. Okay. Now, one of the things on long-term rentals that I find, I think the one exception, the rentals I've seen are very good people and glad to have them in the neighborhood. I think we do not a very good job in communicating the rules to them. And one of the problems is we may tell them or something like that. I think we could develop a 1-page thing to give every renter on the rules that, because the ones that they break. Okay, a good example is keeping the garage doors open. It turns out that a couple of the renters in the neighborhood have been very bad about that. I'm not sure they know it, parking on the street. It's just like they come in here, they don't really know our rules. We've got, you can go online, we've got 10 documents. You can spend a week trying to read all our documents and understanding. We need a 1-page summary to give a renter when they come in here, whether long-term or short-term, on the rules. I've rented other places and there's always a rule thing there, where that would help. Okay. And then the other thing is, I think some data that Mark gave, Mark, if I remember, you said there are maybe 70 long-term rentals in here now, and maybe 100 or 200 that rent part-time. Is that correct, Mark? Am I remembering those data? Like 70 long-term rentals and between 100 and 200 short-term. Well, if you add that up, that's 1/3 of our owners. That's 1/3 of our properties.
Well, you got to remember that there are several condominiums and some homes and townhouses and villas in Wildcat that rent. They'll rent for, let's say, the month of January, and then they'll rent for a period maybe in February and 1/3 in March, or they may do 2 months in the beginning of the year and 2 months at the end of the year with different people in November, December. So you've got some properties that do multiple rentals within them. So we know that somewhere between 8 and 9 and 10% of the community as a whole has annual rentals. And then we probably have another group that does the rest. And I think that it's about 20% of the entire population that does the rental population instead of 30.
Yeah, and good. And the point I want to make is we do lots of things for other parts of the community that are not 20%. In other words, 20% probably don't dine, 20% don't play bocce, 20% don't play pickleball, 20% don't play tennis. But yet we have a group of owners who rent that is important to them. So I think we should take a little bit more of an attitude to try to not encourage renters, but make sure we also look out for those that may be renting. And one of the things that I still think would be that would enhance property values is to allow not short-term rentals, but to allow more monthly rentals if an owner wants to do that. That rule about only 3, in other words, if someone does want to rent by the month, why not be able to allow them rent 6 times a year instead of 3? So, I mean, I think we need to look at it from the standpoint of those owners to help them out. They're part of our owners, and as long as it's done right, and I think that enhances property values. A lot of people, when they rent, particularly if they're not retiring yet, look at the rental that they might be able to do until they retire. And I've had properties like that, and that was one of the things I considered is the rental income. Could I rent it and that type of thing until I use it? So that's something I think we need to look at more. As those people that rent, we need to look as part of the community and look out for them as well as what we do for bocce and pickleball and tennis and dining and everything else. Okay.
Good points. John?
Yeah, one question that I've had, we did have an issue in Wildcat. We do have an issue in Wildcat. And my concern is when somebody comes in for a long-term lease, what type of vetting do we do to try to avoid having somebody come in for a year or so and then discover later that we got an issue?
Good point.
Because at that stage of the game, it's my understanding that if we do see that we have an issue, from a legal standpoint, there's not much we can do about it other than move into some type of an eviction process.
Paul?
I think that's why we need to tighten up the docs, John, for exactly that reason. But getting back to some of Brownie's points, I don't think a one-page document defining what a good renter is going to fix our problems. If you sat down with me and talked to residents in a particular community about their woes with renters, you would understand that immediately, that this is a tough issue. When the police are called in and to dissipate what's going on with renter activity, and then the next day the renter is calling the police to turn in one of the residents. And this goes on for the duration of a season. For the most part, this is not a healthy or good situation, and it's not uncommon. The other thing is, Brownie, I respect those that rent in the community, and that's good. I think we should encourage that, but we should encourage it with very tight declarations in our documents so that things are done properly. The one thing this community doesn't want, or any community for that matter, is a transient population. They don't want a lot of people coming and going in and out of communities all the time. It's particularly stressful short-term rentals when they come in. And that, of course, can destroy any community. But part of why we need to develop the documents a little stricter is when you get a bad renter, you talk with the owner says, okay, I won't lease to this renter anymore. Problem solved, you think. But lo and behold, this bad renter finds another rental a few doors down the way or in another neighborhood in Sterling Oaks, and the owner doesn't know what the history is. And then suddenly we've got a transposed problem in another community. Again, I think we need to work with Jason to make sure that we can enhance our documents so that this sort of thing doesn't occur again. But it goes well beyond what we dealt with last year, we were able to curb these short-term rentals to a degree, but we also have issues with people getting around our declarations and documents by claiming their renters are relatives. That isn't right, and it's a means of circumventing some of the order that we did put in place. So I think we have a lot of work to do here, and I do think it's a strategic initiative. And it was also rated as one of the highest, equal to landscaping in terms of what the community expects of us.
Well, Paul, let me say, I agree with you, and I think the documents need to be worked. And the one page I was talking about was not getting into those type. I'm talking about just the simple rules, closing the garage doors, when the garage pickups are, parking on the street, rules
I
about.
agree with you.
I'm
agree.
talking about those very simple rules, okay? Nothing.
I agree with you.
Okay.
Right, so a good renter just isn't aware. This helps them to be aware.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
And-
Linda,
And not the whole 20 or 30 documents, one page, the stuff that we know that happens that they don't know, and they'll easily correct it if they just knew it, okay?
I'm gonna go to Linda and then to you, Mike.
Okay, so many of the communities here, when you have a rental for them, the application requires a background check
Yeah,
and they pay for it. The renter pays for it. I'm talking annual right now. And that tells you a lot when they have that credit check. Each person on the lease has a check, and it's $35 a person or something like that. You have a picture of their driver's license. You get a lot of information, and you can deny an application if you aren't happy with what turns up on the credit report or the background check. And we do that for many of the condos and coach homes, but some communities do it for everything. So I think we should look at that.
I agree.
Mike. Oh, you're on mute, Mike. Mike, you're on mute.
It's my understanding that it's the sole responsibility of the owner to provide these rules and regulations to their tenants. Do we do anything from the management side when they check in?
Absolutely. They get a renter packet. They have all the rules. Part of their lease packages that they have to sign and say that they are responsible and understand all the rules. So yes, they receive all of that when they get checked in. I would have to say, really, there are a myriad of very good and returning lease people, renters. There's people that are almost a part of the fabric of the community that really are staunch supporters of this community and want to see what's best. And as Lindy has said before, that a lot of those people end up, I think it's probably 17 to 20% of the renter population over the years has probably turned into homeowners. So we're really talking about that small percentage of individuals that try to circumvent the rules, and that's either from the renter side or from the homeowner side.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Good point.
Terry. No, you're on mute, Terry. Terry, you're on.
I see that now. Yeah, it seems to me that maybe Mark, by comparing to other communities that are similar to us, might come up with recommendations of some rule changes and so forth. So far, we have talked generally about maybe having a change here and a change there, but nothing specific. My concern is, and it always has been, you can't legislate for the least common denominator. In other words, if you've got a couple bad actors, it's very, very difficult to change your rules and documents just to accomplish taking care of them. It's also, for instance, when you go through a background check, that doesn't mean that you're not going to find somebody that's going to pass the background check that may become a problem. But how do we legislate that? And that's what I'm asking, is that what rule changes do you think we need to do to enhance our experience here to make it good for the renters and safe for the homeowners?
Well, that's a good question, but I think that's a question that we're not going to answer right now. That's an action item, is to identify what those issues are. Paul?
I agree. We identify the action items, but Terry, we may have a bad actor today, as you put it, and why go through all of this? Well, I would suggest to you that this bad actor shows up in a different guise down the road, either a month later or a year later, but it typically is a different person or a different family, but with the same characteristics that we want to contain. So I think we need to, in fact, go ahead and set up our declarations universally so that we can handle situations like that when they arise.
I agree with you there. The only problem, like I said, sometimes you can get so deep into the woods that you're legislating things for one or two actors as opposed to the general population. I mean, it's a difficult balance to do, but it's one that we need to explore, because I don't want to be so defined that it actually restricts us rather than helps us.
How could it restrict us?
Well, the point is that if you make it so difficult, you have a tendency to make renters less able to do so, which is not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to make our renters be conforming to the policies that we set.
Yeah, and if we do nothing, we have the continual series of bad renters periodically in the community. So my proposal is, let's do something.
I'm
Okay.
not disagreeing with you. All I'm doing is telling you that in all kinds of things of this nature, you have to have a balance, because somebody has to be the policeman. And if you set it up, Mark and his group have to respond, and you have to make sure that they have not only the wherewithal to do so and the ability to do so, but also will agree to do so.
And I think the neighbors in particular communities here would appreciate the fact that we're moving forward and doing something to contain their problem.
Go ahead, chat.
How about as a primary action plan, we work with Jason? I don't know if this is with a project team or what, but we work with Jason to modify our docs to make them in line with what we want as it relates to renters. That certainly is one action plan that comes out of this.
Sure. Let
I
me
agree.
enumerate where we're at in terms of action items. The first one would be to identify and enumerate common renter issues. The second one would be to benchmark other communities. The third one then would be meet with Jason and make amendments to the docs. Next one would be determine what is the transfer fee level that is desired. Our next action item would be create a communication to residents on what are the parameters for leasing and renting properties. You know, what are the rules and regulations they need to adhere to? Then a second action item would be a second communication on what the club does to manage renters and to ensure that renters are adhering to the regs and documents. Now, that could be one communication or two separate communications. And then we have a one page that would be given to every renter on some of the key rules to follow, like the garage doors or parking on the street. So we have a list of 6 or 7 different action items for right now that would help move us down the road in addressing renter-related reforms. Paul?
I would add to that that we want to encourage good owners who rent along the way, so it doesn't appear that we're trying to discourage renters in the community. That's not the intent here, but it's to reinforce good owners who follow the rules.
Good. Yeah, we want to make that communication a positive. Terry?
Yes, Brownie had mentioned also that perhaps to make our homeowners who do rent more significant, if they were able to increase the amount of monthly rentals that they have, 3 to another number, 4 or 5 or something, whatever to that effect. I mean, that's something that he brought up, and I'm not sure whether or not we have any inclination to do that.
No, I think that's one of the issues that has to be identified as part of the amendments to the documents is clarification on what is the number of monthly rentals that can be done given in a year. So that has to be relooked at. It's just one of those. I just incorporated into that heading of identifying and enumerating renter issues. Now, another issue that was in the survey was related to renters, and that is the sign-up process for reservations for events and residents to give priority to residents over renters for signing up and making a reservation for an event. What are some of your reactions and thoughts to that process? Paul?
Well, my first reaction is you're, as a renter, you, the owner has transferred their rights
What kind of pre-admission appointment?
as
Lanny, you want to mute?
No, no one's notified me of that.
Lanny,
You want
would
to
you?
mute? Okay.
Got her.
Okay. Well, my first reaction is as a landowner, you transfer your rights to your renter. So they have all the rights of the owner at that point. So I can't get beyond that. So it's very difficult to restrict a renter from any activity in the community if they followed the rules and they're bona fide renters.
Agree.
Hard to argue with it.
John?
Yeah, I agree with what Paul's saying. I think the bigger issue is, do we have a differential in signing up for the non-residential people versus the residential people? And with that, I'm talking about the tennis members that live outside of the community. I think if you stick with that distinction, you might alleviate the problem anyway.
So this notion that in terms of priority seating at events, reservations, is there a way to distinguish between residents and non-residents? And should we do that? Go ahead, Mike. Go back to you, John.
Yeah, I think of it the same way as like when you go to a golf course, right? The members get to make tee times a week in advance. The non-members make tee times 2 to 3 days in advance. That's the type of situation I'm talking about. If we have a special event going to take place, the residents get first crack at it, and then the non-residents follow suit.
Lindy, and then I'll go to Chap and then to Jack. Go ahead, Lindy.
Yeah, I guess I'd be in favor of looking at a situation where all members get to make reservations at the same time. That's people who live in Sterling Oaks, people who are members, plain members, but guests. I think guests could have a different situation.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
That's what I'd go with. I wouldn't divide us up as to, I mean, a person who rents comes in here and pays $250 to transfer for a year and gets to go to everything and make every reservation just like an owner. But yet a person who comes in and rents for 3 months and joins the association and goes to all the things, or joins the tennis and pays $350, $375 a month, goes to all, supports the club, supports the cabana, and to cut them out, or your non-resident who pays $1,700 for tennis membership. I don't like to divide it up like that, but I could see guests. Yeah.
Explain the difference, Lindia, how guests have access.
Well, if I have people coming down to visit me and I make a reservation for them at a party, I think there should be some difference, either in the price they pay or when they can make the reservation for the guest. But I think all members and owners have the ability to make their reservation.
So the scenario that you want to go to the St. Patrick's event and you want to bring 2 guests with you, you want to make a reservation, you can make the reservation for yourself, but you can't make it for your guests.
That's what I would say.
That occurs in several communities where their dining space is limited and their events are very, very popular. What they want to make sure is that those people who are considered members, whether or not they're transferred lessees, non-resident members, have access to the facilities. However, if you're, and we'll use St. Patrick's Day for an example, you're a member, a resident, or a renter, and you want to come to St. Patrick's Day, and we've had this happen, and it's 10 people. It's 2, the renter, and then 8 guests. And the 8 guests start to fill up the operation. And that's when we have individuals who are resident members or other individuals saying, I'd like to come to this event. We're sold out. So I can see where, I don't know if I want to chastise the actual person that's supposed to be here, but I think we could say, we'll look at this whole thing. And if you still have guests, we'll have availability for guests, after X time. In other words, right now you can sign up for 2 weeks in advance for most events other than New Year's and Valentine's Day. And we would say that you have 1 week that you can sign up guests in front of. Now,
Okay, so what we're saying is then renters who pay the transfer fee have all the rights as a member.
Per our declaration and covenants, they specifically do, except for voting. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have an issue with renters, or somebody renting their residence and the owner still comes to the event as well as the renters?
We went through
Yes,
that.
we do.
So that's,
Well, it's not an issue now. We've put in place that we only have 1 or 2 of those individuals, and we put rules into place that they have to supply a specific amount of money to the operations in order to have that. They have to become a social member and pay an extra fee in order to be able to use the amenities.
I see. Okay, that's isolated and that's
Bob
a
Mason.
operational issue. I'll go to Chap first. Go ahead, Chap.
I think we've lost track of the very valid issue that Lindy has brought up. And what that is how can we restrict the number of guests that are potentially filling up our events, etc., before our residents who don't want to bring guests have a
Yeah.
chance to be part of it. Isn't that
Now,
the issue?
this is an issue. However, I'm going to ask that we table it because it actually falls into a topic that we'll be addressing next week, which is dining and events. Since this is more focused on guests than renters, I'm going to ask that we just hold off until next week when we're discussing issues revolving around dining and events. And this will
Okay with me.
that we need to make an action item regarding.
It's okay with me.
Renter reforms. Are there any other issues that we haven't explored yet? So identifying the issues, benchmarking other communities, revising the docs, creating communication on what needs to be done, are all some of the action steps that we want to be focused on with regard to renter reforms. All right, now, we did a good job today discussing issues revolving around enhancing the Cabana experience and renter reforms. We have currently three additional strategic issues, and those are amenity augmentations, which is looking at whether we need to expand bocce and pickleball specifically, as well as all amenities, what needs to be done going forward over the next 5+ years. And then dining and events. We also will have irrigation to discuss next week as well. After we've covered all of those, we need to go back through and start looking at some of the time frames and setting some dates for when some of these action items will be addressed and who will be the primary people that are responsible. Some of them are a committee, some might be an ad hoc committee, others will be the board of directors or the GM and his staff. But we need to identify who will be accountable for some of these action items. So what I'd like to do is ask that we can agree to meet at this time for the next 2 Wednesdays. If we do that, we should have this document in a pretty complete fashion if we are able to meet for 2 hours the next 2 Wednesdays. Is that acceptable to everyone?
I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm good.
All right. So you're going to have something to add, Lanny?
I just wanted to share, I have surgery next Monday, so I may not be available next Wednesday. I should be available the following.
Can you bring your computer in?
I'll give it a try, but I can't promise how I'll be feeling.
Okay,
She might not want to.
that was a funny.
Come up to the lab, see what's on the slab.
Send me the email. I'll try.
What was it? The Supreme Court, Ruth Ginsburg had her computer in the hospital room for the hearing. Do you see that?
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, if Ruth can do it, so can you, Lanny.
Yeah.
I can give it a try. I just can't promise.
All right,
Okay,
so
that
great
sounds good,
participation today, and I will make the additions to the strategic planning document based on today's discussions, get that out to you, and we'll meet back here at 9 o'clock next Wednesday. Sound good to everyone?
Very good.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Okay,
Just
thank
one
you,
last
Jerry.
parting note. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we're gonna be doing the same thing for the board meeting, okay? And I will be sending out the email notice at 12:45.
Good job, you all.
All right,
See
thanks.
you all tomorrow.